Alright. Actually, let me grab my water. I always like press film and then I'm not even ready, but it's okay. Ooh! You guys will not believe the setup going on behind the camera. Okay. Oh my god, is this? Yeah, wait, no, this is fine. Okay, so today I wanted to talk about having bad placements in your chart. So yeah, this is an astrology video. And for anyone, whether you're like a casual partaker in astrology, all the way on the opposite end of that spectrum where you're like really into it, you're studying it, inevitably what will come up is this concept of bad placements. Some people wouldn't even put quotes around it, but I'm doing that because, I mean, you'll see why. So, damn, I don't know if this is gonna even be reversed on, like, when I stop filming this. I should have done a test shot, it's okay. Also, I know there's a reflection and you can't really see this, but it's fine. I'm gonna explain it. Everything is great. Everything is literally great, guys. So, ooh, okay. Yeah, that's 12. So, this is a chart, right? Oftentimes when we're talking about charts, we're talking about natal charts. So a natal chart tends to be in a circle. Vedic or other forms of astrology will have like squares, but this is based off Hellenistic, Western astrology. And I can make another video where I go deeper into this. I mean, there's so many on YouTube, but you know, sometimes it's the vessel that's explaining it. So, I wanted to talk about this topic because I'm someone that has a placement that is considered very negative. So basically in astrology, there are, so, okay, I'm like, how much do I need to explain here? This is like a snapshot of the sky when someone is born. So this horizontal line here, which I know you can barely see, but like you get the concept. Everything above here is like everything above the horizon. So this line is like the horizon. This is everything above the horizon, everything below. And what happens is the sky is divided into all these different slices. So there's like 12 slices of the sky. And in astrology, they're called houses. And each house represents a different part of your life. So collectively, if there's anything, like any aspect of your life should be able to fit into one of these houses. So for example, family, 4th house. Relationships, 7th house. Friendships, community, 11th house. Death, 8th house. How do I make money? 2nd house. Career, 10th house. You get it. Each one represents a different aspect of our life. And collectively, everything is encapsulated in here. So, because of that, there are houses that represent more challenging aspects of life. Aspects of life that at least most people would consider challenging, often unpleasant. And there's 3 houses in particular that are considered the worst houses. So one of them is the 6th house, which is often related to like physical ailments, physical illnesses, 8th house, kind of like what I mentioned, death. There's like, this is just a very surface level explanation of the houses, just a few keywords. And then the 12th house, which is the ancient folks didn't word it this way because they didn't use the same verbiage that we use in this day and age, but essentially mental illness. So 6th house is like physical, then we have mental illness, right? Some of like the ancient keywords, I mean, I'm not like quoting a text or anything here, but like isolation, imprisonment, exile, banishment, enemies, all the good stuff. So for me, and again, I can make more videos explaining different things. I probably will, because astrology is clearly something I'm just at least a wee bit passionate about, First house is a very important house in your chart. Modern astrology calls it, well, it's called the rising or the ascendant or the first house. Modern astrology, in my opinion, kind of like waters down the first house. I mean, reduces it to just, how the world perceives you. But if you learn from like a traditional ancient Hellenistic perspective, the first house is incredibly important because, and like, how do I explain this in an easily digestible way? It's like everything. It's mind and body. It's, wow, I like completely blanked on all the different polarities associated with the first house. But it is physical, but it's also mental. It's just one of arguably the most important house in astrology. So the ruler of the first house, which is, you look at the sign that the first house is in, that your ascendant is in, and you look to what planet that sign is assigned to. So, and that's the ruler. And the idea is that's kind of like the host. So we have a house, right? And then we have the host. So like obviously the host of a house is going to have a lot of influence on how you're experiencing the house, right? So not only is the first house super important, but the ruler is super important. So for me, to tie it all back to the point, is the ruler of my first house is in the 12th house. So the kind of like title of the 12th house, based on ancient Hellenistic astrology, was the house of bad spirit. And some people will say the 6th house is the worst house, but I kind of get the vibe that most people are like 12th house. They're both challenging, but a lot of people, it's like a kind of like an even divide of which one's worse, right? So I have the ruler of my first house, very important house, very impactful house, in my 12th house. And in astrology, there are planets that are considered, or at least the astrology I'm learning about, which again is ancient Hellenistic astrology. Although I am integrating it with a little bit of modern, but there are planets that are considered forces that will bring challenges, especially when they're under not favorable conditions. And then there are planets that will bring like favorable conditions. So I have, based on a variety of factors, my most destructive planet in my 12th house, right next to the ruler of my first house, right? I have Saturn. I have Saturn in my 12th house. And like, I think any astrologer would look at this placement and be like, that's pretty brutal. And I've even, because I'll watch videos about astrology, and I feel like sometimes astrologers will point out what is considered a challenging placement, but they don't often give people a lot to do with that information. So that's kind of the point of this video, where it's like, okay, I know this now what? And the way I see it, there's kind of two different options you have when you have a bad placement. So a bad placement can include a challenging house placement, or it could be, let's say you have a sign, there's something called a sign in detriment or a sign in fall, which basically means, a planet in detriment or a planet in fall, which means it's in a sign that it's very uncomfortable being in and its function is impaired in some sort of way, oftentimes. So there's like many different ways to have like bad placements. But yeah, the way I see it, there are two kind of ways you can absorb this information and act on it. And the first way is just to be like, everything's hopeless. I'm destined for like horrific things, right? And like, to me, that doesn't seem very productive. I do think there's a little bit of nuance there where it's like, that could be important for validation, I would say, of things that occur and seem to be out of your control, and you're like, I would say areas of your life where you're like, why do I have such bad luck? I do think within astrology, it's important, no matter what form of astrology you're practicing, to feel a sense of empowerment. Even if all that empowerment is like, I am controlling all I can control, and maybe some things are out of my control. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. But, like, for example, with me in this Saturn placement, this is manifested in my life, like, absolutely. And another thing I wanted to note is that astrology is kind of just a language of expressing our life and the way we experience our life. So for me, I'm like, oh yeah, Saturn conjunct ruler of my ascendant. But like, it doesn't have to be in these astrological terms. It's more so like, I had very Saturnian 12th house events that I experienced. But for me, it's kind of just like a way to describe it. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, I've had experiences of a very Saturnian 12th house nature throughout my life already. And so the second option of like what to do with this information is to be like, it's teaching me something. And this is where like I feel personally that my spirituality is inextricably tied into the way I interpret astrology, where I personally believe that I chose this life, I chose this body, and I also chose to be born at this exact time where these planets are in this position. Like, I feel like this is kind of like the natal chart to me feels like a reference of kind of like, what was the whole idea with this lifetime? Like, I feel like it can give us clues of like what the whole point was. And of course, this is just my personal beliefs, but I cannot deny, and I will not deny, that I definitely view astrology through a spiritual lens. So yeah, this idea that like I chose the Saturnian 12th house type of experiences just allows me to like kind of trust in everything that has happened, and to, I feel like the extra layer to that is like I'm trusting in it because I feel like it feels karmic to me. And okay, I know I keep like throwing in different words, right? And I believe it's really important to define things. So karma, although it's a word everyone's familiar with, the way I interpret it is it's kind of like a balance, right? Where it's like in a past lifetime, like maybe I was on the opposite end of this, where I never experienced these 12th house things. So when I say that, like I never experienced this extreme isolation, right? This long-lasting isolation. And maybe I was always surrounded by people. So by coming into this lifetime, it was kind of like let me see what there is to learn by not being around a ton of people, at least for a certain period of time. And what that teaches me and what that teaches my soul, like I feel like karma kind of rounds out a soul. It makes a soul like, like well-rounded, where it's like, it wouldn't be productive for the soul to just keep experiencing the same life over and over and over again. And this is through the perspective of like being human, incarnating as a human, is rooted in this idea that our soul's here to learn something and to develop and to grow. So that is from where I'm operating from. I don't know about that grammar, but you know what I mean. So when I look at challenging placements, to me, it's like a balance of karma, where, and this is where like the lines blur for me between ancient and modern astrology, and how much I'm like taking from both. And I mean, this might change over time, but for me, it's like not ancient, modern astrology can be rooted in this idea of like self-development, like trying to integrate the psyche or take things out of the subconscious. Whereas like ancient astrology, the planets, the forces are a bit more external, is how it appears to me as someone who has recently been like studying it more. But yeah, for me, it's like having challenging placements is just an opportunity to learn from the struggle. And yeah, I definitely I've had moments where I haven't been as optimistic, but I feel like even under all the layers of despair and suffering and distress and hopelessness that I've experienced, deep, deep, deep down underneath all of that, even if it was just a whisper of it, there was always a whisper of hope. And sometimes I like before I became more spiritual, I didn't have a lot of words to describe it. This idea of different lifetimes. But now that I am spiritual, it's like I have this hope that there is a reason, or not this, I have this knowing that there is a reason for this. And the hope that I have is like this, maybe hope isn't quite the right word actually. It's more this trust. This trust in like, this is teaching me something. I'm learning from this extremely challenging, these extremely challenging experiences that I'm going through. That's me saying it in non-astrological like language, right? But to say it in astrological language, I am learning from this challenging placement. Do you see what I mean? It's just a different way of framing our experiences. It's not necessarily saying that like, actually, I'm like, I don't want to get too much into the, what's the word? I'm blanking on the words. Like, you know, when there's a hyperfixation on the exact words in the language that we're using. Clearly, this is something I already do because I think communication is very important, and having a baseline, like, definition, because words can be interpreted so differently, is really important. Anyway, I guess to just like wrap this up, I want to say that if you're someone who has been told that you have a really challenging placement in your chart, like, I feel like to me that can feel not empowering. And I just think it's important that you feel empowered, like, through whatever beliefs you have. But if we're going based on my beliefs, that your soul really felt ready for this shit. Your soul felt like they could handle this. And your soul is probably doing a beautiful, amazing job navigating the challenges that it's going through. I mean, like, you know, the soul's, I feel like I'm going way more complex than I want to go, but like, you know, we have our conscious experience as we are in this lifetime, but the soul is kind of like a string of consciousness through multiple lifetimes. So it's like, what you're experiencing is what you're, okay, no, I'm getting too complicated now. But yeah, this is something that, if you resonate with the idea that we chose our lifetime, which is not something I like to push on to other people. I'm merely just stating it as my own belief, because not everybody just feels that way, you know. And I did just want to emphasize that just because our soul chose something doesn't invalidate how struggling or how challenging it feels for us in this like single consciousness that we have in this lifetime, where like it doesn't invalidate that, like, for example, there are just certain things in life where you'd be like, why the hell would I ever choose this, you know? And for me, it's comforting to feel like there's some reason, even if I don't fully know it, there's some explanation for why I decided, or for why this is occurring. But I totally understand that doesn't resonate with everyone. If it doesn't resonate with you, then what I'm saying probably isn't meant for you. But if it does, like, just know there are people out here with rough placements, and we are navigating it, we are getting through it, and we are also like embracing it. Like Saturn, I embrace you. Okay. Because what it's either embracing you or pretending you're not there. And I choose to embrace. So that is all for today. hope everyone is doing wonderful. Yeah, I just adore astrology. And yeah, it's just, there's so much more for me to learn. I'm excited to continue to share. Yeah, and if anyone else is like curious to hear any thoughts that I have regarding any specific part of astrology, let me know, because there's honestly infinite discussion points that could be made regarding astrology. So, yeah, ta-ta for now.